only pretending to be kind to her in order to get closer and then catch her at the scene of the crime. This is his strategy, his plan. The next moment he looked away, and the princess's gaze was drawn to the weapon on his back. He turned his back on the princess, and raising his fist to the middle of his chest, confidently thought that he was tired of not having fun. But the princess joyfully looked at the huge sword on his back and asked if he also had the famous sword Irugo. And of course the man could not restrain himself and turned to the princess, blushing. He said loudly, "Of course there is," and took out his sword, which was on his back. "Wow," the princess said in surprise. "Nigel's sword is the longest of all. It is the size of Alexandra. Therefore, even when taking it out of its sheath, a strong wind current is formed," which the man remembered only now. Concernedly, he wanted to say something, but he could only think that he was finished. But he only wanted to show her his favorite sword. But this is a princess. Even if she points a finger at him and calls him a barbarian, he will not be able to resist anything. He himself did not notice how excited he was by the conversation about the sword. Whoever saw him would think that he was a bandit who was torturing the little princess or intimidating her with his weapon. Jonathan, growling, warned him not to draw it from its scabbard, saying that no matter what his intentions were, his appearance could seem intimidating. She's about to scream in fear, however. His original plan really was to scare the princess, but now he honestly didn't want to. He just wanted to show off his favorite weapon, when suddenly the man gasped in surprise. He noticed how the princess clenched one hand into a fist and covered her face with the other. General Nigel pursed his lips, looking sadly at the princess. The man put his weapon behind his back and looked at the princess with his head down. That's all he thought. Now you can't even talk about the sword with the princess. Suddenly, unexpectedly for the man, the girl took a step. He was alarmed and upset. His eyebrows came together to the bridge of his nose. Suddenly, the princess, pulling her hair back, said in admiration that it was really so polished, and you could look into it as if into a mirror. And such a clear pattern, it was simply incredible. The girl continued to be amazed. She had never seen such large swords up close. The general was completely dismayed by the princess's behavior and asked if she was okay. Alexandra asked in surprise why he was asking her this, but Nigel couldn't give an exact answer. Every second he embarrassedly covered his face with his hand. He remembered how, in the war with Sylvanus, he constantly received such mockery as, "Show her your face, are you an animal or a man?" They did not embarrass him or shame him. No matter what anyone says, this scar is a symbol of his victory in a fierce battle. However, they really could not do anything with the disgust shown towards him. The children began to cry at the sight of the Golitza. At first, even Diana shuddered at the sight of him. And when a swarm of mockery and crying began at his every appearance, he realized everything. He couldn't be near the small and defenseless, so he thought that the little princess would also immediately swallow her tongue out of fear. But, contrary to his expectations, both at first and now, he could not find either fear or disgust in her eyes. Princess Sylvanus suddenly, for no apparent reason, addressed the general by name. In her eyes, there was only a questioning of him as of an ordinary person. The man shuddered. Toga Princess, seeing the reaction, asked how he dealt with the rust on his sword. This little girl from Sylvanus had her eyes staring at him. He thought it was curiosity. No, she had the look of a real researcher. Her eyes seemed to say, "Well, a scar, and so what? The only thing that worries me is your sword." That's what was in them. "And I'm good," Nigel thought, nodding his head. "Others think they know everything about her, but then why ask how to deal with rust when you are the Princess of Sylvanus?" Kneeling down, the man said that he takes care of him twice a day, morning and evening. "It takes a lot of effort," the girl noted. "But the general did it because he was worth his care." The princess cautiously asked if she could touch his sword. The man, embarrassedly looking away, said, "Be careful and don't get hurt. It's very sharp, so she can get hurt just by touching it." Thus, it is very large, so the wearer's body is strengthened, and while wearing it, the princess learned a lot of new things. But the general did not let up and said that this was possible because the master used a slightly different hardening method and the like. "Nigel talks a lot when he talks about his sword. He really loves him," the girl thought, smiling. She used to learn everything only through the eye of the emperor. It's funny, it was an interesting experience, but it felt like she had forgotten something important. But what was it? Suddenly it dawned on our heroine, and she gasped loudly twice at once. Hearing this, the general instantly and reflexively pointed his sword towards the door, covering the girl with his back. He thought what had happened, but there was nothing dangerous around. When suddenly the princess said tea, and after a pause, said upsetly that it had cooled down, the general was simply in shock. He was surprised that she had such an expression on her face because of the tea. The princess sighed in frustration and said that she was waiting for it to become warm to drink. His Highness Theodore's man was simply shocked and said in surprise that then it could be simple, but his friend fell silent. He continued to suggest how to ask the maids to bring a new one, but suddenly realized what kind of ones she had. He felt ashamed that it was all because of her, and Alexandra thought it was a pity that she would be able to try it during Theodore's next visit. It seems that she was too focused on his story and forgot about the important things, the girl said. But because the dialogue was too interesting, that's all. The man looked sadly at the bride of his respected commander, and he felt ashamed of his behavior. Then he invited the little girl to drink tea together at his home. The princess was surprised. He shyly turned his head to the side and put his hand on his neck as a blush formed on his cheeks and asked if she wanted to come visit. "Well, if she doesn't want to," the bear said, "then it's okay, but the princess said that she wanted to and told her to go." As Alexandra began to think she would go to visit because she was invited and she could leave her house, when she was in captivity, she could not even dream of this. She thought about what to do when you go to visit. She heard that you shouldn't come empty-handed, but she had nothing. She turned to the table. Nigel justified that he did it for the sake of spying on the princess from a close position. The girl apologized to Theodore and wondered if this would be normal. Then, Alexandra said, she would take cookies with her. The general shuddered in surprise and went cold. He thought about those very best cookies. He wondered why he had just remembered the strange recent decree of His Highness. "You don't like cookies?" the princess suddenly asked, and said that they are quite tasty here, and recently they became even tastier. The man said that that's not the point. Alexandra knew that she had planted another seed of doubt in Nigel. Time passed, and finally the day came, the wedding of Alexandra and Theodore. "Well, move faster." "What are these flowers doing here?" Rihanna commanded everyone. "At this place, the princess will get out of the carriage, so nothing should block her path to the ceremony." The conversations did not end when the maid turned to her friends and asked what they were doing here when everyone was so busy. But suddenly her look became dumbfounded when she saw tears flowing from her friend's eyes. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Rihanna asked. As the girls cried and said that it was incredible that their hands were capable of such a thing. In her life as a makeup artist, she would never create such beauty again. It was truly a great honor for her to help the princess dress up. Rihanna opened her eyes in surprise, and her cheeks also turned red. In front of her, she saw Princess Alexandra, that she looked beautiful. She said that they were exaggerating tirelessly, that this time they even burst into tears, although they saw her during the fitting and now again. The princess looked simply gorgeous. Several flowers were inserted into her hair was braided, the rest was twisted, and the dress just fit perfectly. The decoration on her neck emphasized the color of her amethyst eyes. The chambermaids unanimously said that this is because everything beautiful is new and heart-tugging every time. The girl with a short ponytail said that His Highness Theodore should see her in such a wonderful form as soon as possible. Rihanna said that it was time to go. The carriage was already ready. The lady with the scar said, "That's why they say they meet by their clothes. But won't this outfit harm the greatness of their Sylvanus Empire?" she asked. Rosemary saw and thought with admiration that this precious diamond flower was a pink mother-of-pearl ranunculus, and wondered how many diamonds were in her platinum chain. It was a whole palace on her neck. She approached the princess and eagerly asked to let her be a bridesmaid, her maid, or rather, her faithful maid. Suddenly, the chambermaids from the palace shielded the princess from Rosemary and told the lady not to worry. There was no need to entrust such a burdensome role to a high-ranking lady. In addition, they woke up at dawn today and must have been very tired. Fatigue is harmful to beauty, and reported that a pearl carriage had been prepared for them. Each of the three ladies was attracted to something different, and if they say so, then fine, especially since they didn't like to work hard, so it's even better. The princess watched her chambermaids from her native empire with satisfaction, rejoicing at this outcome. Alexandra said that her ability to cajole the maids with flattery was excellent. The maid with curly hair nodded and said no way. Theodore's servants are smart, and they immediately noticed that her maids were careless and arrogant. But it was difficult for ordinary maids to oppose the aristocratic ladies. but the visit of Mr. Nigel could be the trigger. Therefore, after this visit, they began to do the work of maids. Although she was grateful to them, the decision to stand up against the aristocrats was not easy for them. Camilla told the princess not to look at her like that, because she would become the mistress of the palace. But suddenly Alexandra said, Then the curly-haired maid asked the princess if she knew that before the inhabitants of Irugo were constantly in anxiety, because the longer the war lasted, the more Mr. Theodore, the protector of Irugo, was absent. And in the end, they were not ready to confront the monster lands. Others pretended to be calm, but inside they were trembling with anxiety, since they did not know when the monsters might invade. And so for them, in a similar position, the princess became a symbol of hope and peace. Such was the desire of the people of Irugo. The princess understood them perfectly because using his zeal, Sylvanus can make Irugo a laughing stock, and her father again acted clumsily and immaturely. But approaching the carriage, the princess noticed a rather familiar figure next to her and raised her head. Directly in front of Nez, blocking the entrance to the carriage, stood the knight who represented her upon arrival. "You look completely different until you have washed," the knight said rudely, having looked around. Even the first princess became a beauty. When he said that she repeated the styling of the second princess and asked if this was so, he immediately understood this, raising his nose to the top. When suddenly he remembered that this was a princess before him, whose wedding was with the prince of this kingdom, and bowing, he asked to be allowed to accompany her. He smiled and asked her to please give him her hand, but the next moment the princess quickly walked past him. The man turned around in surprise, not understanding what was happening, and Alexandra thought that he was not worth the ceremony. The face of the tactless knight immediately became red with shame, and he stammered loudly and asked the princess what kind of bad manners this was. Suddenly he heard the rest of the knights standing behind him begin to laugh at him and turn their heads away. Blushing with shame, the tactless knight indignantly thought how she dared to disgrace him in front of the others, that these savages were turning up their noses in front of him, and should be grateful that such a handsome, high-ranking knight was in front of them. And finally, the carriage with the princess set off, and Alexandra was able to breathe out a sigh of relief and thought that even though the lower knight had already received what he deserved, this one still couldn't calm down. Alexandra thought that after the end of the wedding ceremony, most of the members of the delegation would leave, but several knights from the guard would remain, and he was one of them. This is how one day the news would reach the ears of the emperor. The girl was worried that one day the emperor would find out that she was not mocked in accordance with his order. But now we are already at the wedding palace. The girls, looking from the side in surprise, could not help but notice that there were newsmen standing everywhere. A friend said that the ceremony was far from over, but the atmosphere was already very lively. Suddenly it was announced in the palace that General James, General Nigel, and the strategist Jonathan, 3 wings of His Highness Theodore, had arrived. Steel Sword Nigel thought as he walked that he felt uncomfortable without his sword and constantly wrinkled his face. The genius strategist Jonathan, as if understanding his friend, told Nigel that he would not have to fight today. And at that time, defending the sword, James thought that he wanted to quickly see His Highness in his wedding attire. The ladies, hiding behind their fans from the men, were enthusiastically thinking about how incredibly popular they were. When suddenly she asked where Mrs. Diana was, she always went with them. It was the Irugo quartet, which everyone envied. But just after the question, a girl with blue hair approached her and asked if they were looking for her. The girls happily met their friend Lady Diana, and she said that she was glad to meet them, Lady Rose and Lady Grey. The girls were surprised and delighted that their idol greeted them first. Grey told Lady Diana that she was still charming today. Rose asked if it wouldn't turn out that she would be more beautiful than the princess. "God," Diana said with an embarrassed smile. "You shouldn't say that at Mr. Theodore's wedding, because when they meet the princess, they will understand that she is much more beautiful." They apologized, and Grey asked if she would go to Mr. Tyr. Rose said that the groom's room was on the opposite side. The girl gasped in surprise and explained to the young ladies what was the matter and where she was going. The ladies were very surprised by this, and he frowned and asked almost in unison what she had just said. The lovely ladies were dumbfounded and asked that she would go to the bride's room to see the princess. Diana smiled. Confusedly, she said that the princess had arrived in the unfamiliar lands of Irugo, so she would be lonely and uncomfortable here, and they met her on the very first day, and of all the girls she knew only her. But should it be Lady Diana? The young ladies suddenly thought, and Gray asked if she was talking about this circumstance. It seems that Rose said. They wondered what to do. It seemed to them that the first princess called Lady Diana, which means she knows about the relationship between her and His Highness Theodore. After the war, Theodore and his inner circle returned to the capital, and many ladies began to circle around His Highness, but in the end, they all had to surrender. The girl, smiling, asked His Highness how his training went today. It was Diana. Next to him was the perfect girl. One should not forget what the Palamon family is like. Rumors of the glory of her brother Charles are still on everyone's lips. The only lady whom Theodore allowed to be close, but due to the royal order, this relationship did not bear fruit. Such was the assessment of the secular society of Irugo. Rose thought that from the point of view of Princess Sylvanus, this was a political marriage. So she began to think that nothing could be done about it. Gray thought, how dare she dress up in a wedding dress and call Lady Diana? How did the ladies, realizing that it was all too unanimous, confidently tell Diana that they would support her and tell her not to lose heart? The blue-haired girl asked why they expressed their support for her so sharply and, thanking her, said that she was glad that they supported her. The ladies thought that their lady was very affectionate and wondered what they should do if the princess insulted such a kind man. When Diana saw the princess's maids, she told the ladies that now it was really time for her to go, that she was glad to talk. Rose said sympathetically that if something happened, be sure to tell them, and Gray told her friend that she needed to tell everyone this hot news. And now a girl with dark blue hair was already standing in front of the door to the waiting room for the newlyweds. Looking sadly at the door, Diana thought that since childhood, she had imagined herself sitting behind this door. But she can no longer do anything about the royal order, and, unfortunately, political marriages are not a rare occurrence among aristocrats. But still, she overcame herself and knocked on the door. "Come in," the princess's voice was heard. She was sitting in a beautiful white dress, holding a bouquet in her hands, and suddenly looked at her. The girl shuddered in alarm. She never expected to see the beauty that she saw, and it even made her feel disgusted. As a friend, she bowed and stutteringly introduced herself to Her Highness Lady Diana, said that they had met briefly. The princess said that she remembered. She then brought her tea. "Okay," Alexandra said unexpectedly, and looking at the girl with interest, asked what brought her here. But Diana continued to look down worriedly, not showing her emotions to the princesses. She angrily bit her lip and frowned. She thought that in order to hide her emotions, she, without noticing it, lowered her head, because the princess had become even more beautiful since their last meeting. "You can keep your emotions under control," she thought, because even when Theodore's coldness and indifference pierced her soul like thorns, she always kept a smile on her face. "His soul is unchanging," he told her, and realizing that her beloved person would not change, she grinned. Raising her head, Diana, smiling, said that she, of course, came to congratulate the two of them on their wedding. Tears of resentment began to appear in the corners of her eyes when she literally squeezed out the words that they were perfect for each other. After which, realizing that she could not cope with her emotions, she bowed to the princess again, her hands trembling. Soon her whole body began to tremble. She pursed her lips in resentment and held back the tears coming to her eyes. But the next moment her fears were swept away. She only shuddered when the princess unexpectedly dryly said, "Thank you." Dead silence hung in the room, and Diana, looking dumbfounded at Theodore's bride, wondered if this was all her reaction. Alexandra didn't care. During the banquet, she did not look like a person lacking ingenuity, and thought that she was only pretending to be calm, and said irritably that she and Theodore grew up together. They had an extremely special relationship from the very beginning, because His Highness's mother was very close to her mother, and their family's relationship was also excellent. It was the same between her brother and His Highness Theodore, Diana said. It was a relationship that would not become strange even after the wedding. She realized this during their first meeting. This was their destiny, and when she visited the royal palace, Mother Theodora showered her with her love. The girl literally said that she loved her like her daughter-in-law, and besides, His Highness always took care of her. Tearfully, she said that she too must have gone through similar things, but initially His Highness Theodore did not allow any ladies to approach him because of his coldness. But they are old acquaintances, so everything is different for them, literally saying that she is special, and while she is here, she will never win Theodore's heart. The princess remained silent and thought, which, to be honest with herself, she sat and didn't interrupt her speech, but it's really very boring. Alexandra, sitting with a straight face, didn't understand whether it was always so uninteresting to listen to someone brag about their boyfriend. She doesn't care at all whether she has a special relationship with her business partner or is his lover. All that matters is whether this relationship will become her trump card in future negotiations. For example, she would ask if Theodore wants to spend a hot night with his beloved. If he expands his business capital, then she will give him a divorce, and he would happily agree to the conditions. In fact, divorce was a card she could play after Theodore became crown prince, and it would ruin the emperor's plans. But that conversation was still a long way off, she thought. How did the girl realize that they were not listening to her, and thought that she seemed superfluous to her because of her unexpected intrusion, and even began to be proud of herself? How then? She raised her head up and realized that the princess was thinking about something completely different. If you react haphazardly to a boastful story about a guy, it will be difficult to survive in society. Alexandra learned this through the eye of the emperor. When Diana said that, in fact, she really couldn't imagine their marriage with His Highness Theodore, the princess's eyes widened. She suddenly began to speak differently, the girl noticed. The usual feeling of hostility appeared, but spreading her hands, the lady said that there was no subtext in this. Iarugo and Silvanus had been in hostile relations for a long time, so she did not think that such a wedding was possible. She quickly got out of it, but began to alarm her with every new word. Alexandra finally realized that the whole meaning of Diana's words was, "I love Theodore, but for the sake of peace he will marry her," and she herself admitted it. That's what was meant. Before leaving, the emperor's eye awakened memories in Alexander. Her father told her that when everything was ready, he would send her a sign. And he ordered that his daughter drink this potion when she received the sign, and if she didn't wash it off, she should give it to Theodore. He shouted menacingly at her with piercing bright green eyes and said that this is a royal duty that only she who has no abilities can fulfill. Alexandra must become the spark of war. And remembering this, the princess smiled and thanked Diana, said that she would live in a successful marriage as she wished. The girl shuddered. Alexandra said that she also supports the general point of view that this wedding is not an unusual union between a man and a woman, but a union for the sake of establishing peace. There was silence between the two ladies. The princess was serious and the lady was shocked. Then Diana became extremely embittered and, trembling with irritation, thought that this girl could really drive a person crazy. The lady came to the older girls and said that she had mind-blowing news. The ladies said that Gray came to their salon without permission, without being a member. This is inappropriate. The girl interrupted the lady and said that they didn't understand. This really was incredible news about Lady Diana. These conversations and gossip attracted the attention of the right hand of Prince Theodore James, and he stopped to listen. Nigel asked James in surprise what he was looking at there. They should hurry up, watching the departing gossips. The guy said nothing. Bringing his eyebrows to the bridge of his nose, the red-haired man thought that he had not heard the end, but they were clearly talking about Diana. Then the guy realized what could have happened, and turning away from his comrade, he said, looking at the floor, that he would go away for a while. This surprised the man. He asked James what he meant and where he was going. But the next moment, in the place of his comrade, there was no one left except for the flying leaf. Nigel was dumbfounded. This big bear thought in horror that trouble had happened because his comrade James was waiting, His Highness Theodore. He wanted to see His Highness in a suit, and he himself said that he would go somewhere before meeting with His Highness. And then what did Nigel think? The sun would rise in the west. The man said this badly and thought that although in his case such behavior is normal, but again he gets all the big shots. People think that he has a bad character. But in fact, this guy, the sword of His Highness James, is responsible for all the madness in their squad. At the same time, Diana thought what the princess meant when she said that this was not just a marriage, but a union of a higher order. She asked him not to make him laugh, because she was Theodore's destiny. A fateful first meeting. She was there during the most difficult periods of his life. The death of his brother made their relationship even stronger, and besides, she is in a close relationship with the union of the three. However, from Diana's point of view, the princess proudly asked if she thought the wedding would be different because of the bride. If he married her, The wedding would have a special meaning, a marriage ending hundreds of years of struggle, a grand wedding union for the sake of peace, a special marriage. A wedding that attracts the attention of the whole world only because it is the union of Alexandra and Theodore.